Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Healing Home. I'm your host, Michelle, and you may have caught me off guard there. I forgot to take myself off the screen before I played the intro, but here we are anyway. Intro's played. I'm with you guys, and I'm very excited as always. I have to say that Marybeth let me know that she is going to be a little late. She was running into some construction traffic on her way home. So I'm going to hold it down with you guys as usual while we're waiting for her to come in. But, I just want to start off by saying, as always, thank you to everyone who is subscribed on patreon.com. Boy, oh boy. I feel like I'm like a broken record sometimes, saying how much I appreciate all the support, but I say it for a reason. It's because I freaking mean it. And it's seriously motivating on all sorts of levels. It's kind of like a milestone for me because Patreon's always been something I've wanted to do and wanted to offer for people. And so now that I have a Patreon and people actually are signing up and enjoying it and just filling down to throw support towards Mario and I and we're working on, it seriously means so much to us. And I just have to say thank you. And so anyone who wants to become a member of Patreon, patreon.com/the healing home is the place to do it. And so while Marybeth is hopefully almost here with us, I'll just do her intro for all of you guys who are hanging out with me, so that some of you may not be familiar with her, because to be honest, I'm just finding Marybeth myself. And so as soon as I heard her speak on the Growcast podcast, which Lee Thunder Chicken, shout out Lee, introduced to me, I was like, whoa, I really want to talk to this woman because she has a lot to share and she is very knowledgeable. She has so much experience in the world of cannabis growing, of just growing crops in general, working in the cannabis industry. She just is a wealth of knowledge. And so I'm honored that she is going to be able to be with us today once she gets here. But, she is a horticulturist, Marybeth Sanchez. She is an IPM, which stands for Integrated Pest Management Specialist, with decades of experience as a home grower of a multitude of crops, microbial. Oh my God. Microbial studies and regenerative agriculture. She also works regularly with cannabis growers of all levels to achieve optimal conditions for healthy, organic, and pest-free plants through her vast knowledge and 10 plus years of experience in the cannabis industry. She's also a staple team member / guest on the Growcast podcast with Jordan River and others. And so for people who aren't familiar with Growcast, as I said, I'm just coming across them because Lee Thunder Chicken sent an episode with Marybeth to me. And I was like, whoa, this is awesome. It's right up my alley. It is particularly awesome for people who are growing cannabis, because one of the cool things I love about the podcast is that they are focused on growing. They're focused on all the things that go into it. So soil health, water health, fertilizers, light, indoor, outdoor, pests, you name it, any of the things that you would think that come along with growing cannabis, which is quite a bit, they talk about it. And as a home grower myself, somebody who has, I've learned from a really good friend of mine. She taught me a lot of the basics many years ago. And I took classes with her and things like that. But then, since then, I've basically kind of been a self-taught cannabis grower for the most part. Also, listening to people like Marybeth, people who on the Growcast, people like these folks who are sharing their knowledge and things that they've learned so that they can pass it on to people like me and other people who are, home growers, or they might be, growing on a larger scale too. All these tips come in handy. And so I've learned a lot throughout the years, just trial and error, just with a lot of things in life, how you learn as you go, you take risks, you experiment, you try things out, you see what works, you see what doesn't work, you change things up, and then you add to your arsenal of tips and tricks and tools on your belt. And so that is one of my goals with this podcast too, is to really get to know and talk to people who have a tool belt, and who are putting their tools to use, and who are not afraid to admit when there was a mistake, when something didn't work. They're not afraid to talk about the times where they didn't know what they were doing. They're not afraid to admit when they don't know something. But they're more than welcome to share all the things that they know and that they know well. And so that to me is seriously something that's so crucial with all this kind of information. And so while we're waiting for Mary Beth, maybe let me know, anyone in the chat who, if you're familiar with Mary Beth or you're familiar with the Growcast, let me know. Give me a shout out in the chat, and maybe tell me a little bit about how you came across Mary Beth, how you came across Growcast, and if you are a grower of any kind. Because the thing I love about Mary Beth from listening to her is that she obviously has a lot of experience in the cannabis industry, but she's not limited to cannabis. And to me, that seriously is really crucial, and it's really cool. And that is the main reason why I wanted to talk to her, because it's like, a lot of the things that you can apply to a cannabis, particularly with certain fertilizers and stuff and methods, you can use in your garden if you're growing crops, or you're growing flowers or medicinal herbs or whatever you are growing. Typically there's a lot of crossover. But because cannabis it's kind of a finicky plant. There's a lot of things that can attack it. There's a lot of things that can happen. It requires certain conditions. It grows better in certain conditions than others. And so there's all these little things about it that, as I've said, I've learned along the way. So for somebody that's brand new to it, it can maybe seem overwhelming, because there is a lot to, take into account. There's a lot of things to be looking out for when it comes to the health of your cannabis plant. Is there a pest? What can you do to prevent things? So that's all the stuff that Mary Beth seems to have a really vast amount of knowledge on, which is another reason why I'm really excited to have her once she gets here. So let's see who we have in the chat so far. Jenny G is here. What's up, my lady? Hello, Mercury Mel. Thank you for being here. I think this would translate to vintage love. What's up? Howdy. Thanks for coming into the Healing Home tonight. What's up, Sarah G? Debbie Dufek says, I have had 4 of 7 plants so far turn male. I'd be appreciative of any advice on how to improve my odds of getting female plants. That's a great question, because, there's, depending on the seeds, I know a lot of companies, if you buy seeds, they feminize them, which I actually, that process seems strange to me. I wonder what they do. I think it's a chemical process that they have to put it through. So I'm going to actually write that down, feminized seeds, for when Mary Beth gets here. And I can ask her about that, because I also know too that, the plants can turn male if they're like extra stressed, or they can turn hermaphroditic, which would be then, they go from female to male. And so that's why conditions are so crucial. Your planting medium, the pots, if you're growing in pots, the pots matter. The type of pots that you use matter. Fabric pots are like kind of your best bet if you're going to go that route. But I don't want to get too much into all these details before she's here, because I want her to be able to take the floor. So Jenny G says I'm a total noob. Awesome. That's great, because there's so many great things about being a newbie to anything, really, and thank you. Guests are always A+. Well, thank you so much. What's up, polymathing / Lou? Hoping to talk to you soon, my sir. I'm sure you're still down. But yeah, so okay, I'm glad to see that there's some people hanging out. Again, Mary Beth, I hope she gets here. Like, I don't know. I guess I could stall like much more, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, hopefully she'll be here within the next like 10 minutes or so. And if not, we'll pivot and I'll just start talking about certain things that I know, and then we can fill in the gaps with what she has to share. So, for example, like right now, I was gifted a really large amount of cannabis starts this year, like an amount that I can't grow that many, even in like on like a legal level. So I've given a lot of them away actually to friends who either are growers or they want to grow or what have you. But so I still have a few that are in pots still, and I know they're like telling me every day when I go out to them that they want to be out of those pots, right? And so I really need to get them in the soil, but I can't. You can only have a certain amount if you don't have a license. So I'm kind of running into that sort of issue. But it's interesting to see the cannabis plants when they do go into modes of stress, what they end up doing. So I've found that sometimes if a plant is stressed out and it's like still in its vegetation stage, like it is right now, it can start to flower. Like it'll start to flower prematurely, but it won't produce buds. It'll just start having the very first stages of flowering. And that can be an indication of stress. And so if you're seeing that, it could literally be, it's in too small of a pot, it's not getting enough of something, or it's getting too much of something. Maybe it just isn't liking the location it's in. There's so many factors. But aside from the premature flowering, I've noticed sometimes the leaves can turn colors. So, like if the plant has like a purple tinge to it, like if it's going to be some kind of purpley bud in the end, sometimes that purple color can come out early in the leaves. If it's stressed, sometimes the leaves can curl. There's, and curling and discoloring and things like that can also be an indication of a nutrient deficiency. So there's all sorts of things. But if you're wondering if it's like a stress thing, um, I would look for those indicators that I just mentioned first, and then you can also try and research the nutrients that might be needed with that. I've talked about it before, but I have a book by Ed Rosenthal. It's Ed Rosenthal's Marijuana Grower's Handbook. Now, it's kind of an old school book a little bit. I don't remember what year it came out, but I've had it for a long time. But that is a really good book for beginners for sure, because they go through like many, many, many of the details that you need to know, indicators for things, how to harvest, lighting, hydroponics, you name it, it's kind of in there. And so I find that to be a very, very, very great book to have around, even if you have been growing for a long time. Having a few books around that have tried and true things in the book that can help you during situations where you're not sure what's going on is really good. There's another book out there called Cannabis. Oh my God, I'm spacing on the name. Um, Cannabis Pharmacy, and that is a really great book too. And so that one is awesome. Doesn't go in depth on like growing conditions and stuff, but when it comes to like the chemistry of cannabis and the cannabinoids, the terpenes, the differences between them, what they are, CBD, THC, THCA, CBDA, going through all of the things, all the details for somebody who might be wanting to like make things, understand the chemistry behind what's going on. That is a great book for that. So that's Cannabis Pharmacy. I can't remember the guy's name who wrote it, but I can look it up right now and I'll put it in the chat, because that's a great book. And I've read it. Actually, I've read it entire. I've read it through like cover to cover, but then I also reference it quite a bit, um, because it's so valuable, and it's actually very just practical. That's part of it. That's funny. That's part of the title, Cannabis Pharmacy: The Practical Guide to Medicinal Cannabis. So I'll just throw this link up in the chat for people who might be wanting to look into that book. But that's one that I recommend for sure. And then, like I said, the Ed Rosenthal's Grower's Handbook is really great. Yeah, cannabis pharmacy. Pharmacy. Every time I see the word pharmacy, I just think of pharmacy because you take out the P and it's pharmacy. That's really disturbing and telling. Anyway, yeah. So okay, pharmacy. Pharmacy. And yeah, so I hope you guys are doing good. Didn't anticipate her to be this late, if I'm being completely honest. Kind of a bummer. It's always a bummer when this happens because for multiple reasons. Because I was planning on having a guest at 4 o'clock, and that's how the cookie crumbles sometimes. So I appreciate anyone who's down to hang out and stay. So, okay, for some reason that's not, that, link maybe isn't gonna go up into the chat, but that's okay. Just remember cannabis pharmacy. So the link's up there for that book, and you can check that out if you want to. But other than that, well, let's just talk about what's going on here on our property. So we are post summer solstice, but it's been glorious weather here. Oh my goodness. I would say it's just been one of those times where the weather, and I don't even want to jinx it, but it's just been so mild and so pleasant and sunny, very windy, but in a good way. The plants are really happy. I just got a chance to just go through the whole garden yesterday and I hula hoed and pulled weeds and, just trimmed everything up. Things are just looking really great, coming in really nice. And what happened to us was while I was gone back home last month, I was gone for about 11 days. We had a friend stay at the house while we were gone, and she was just around to, oh, I see a Mary Beth. All right. So we can catch up later at the end of the show about all that because I'm more excited about talking to Mary Beth than giving random updates about my garden because we can talk about that later. So once she's all set and ready, I'm so excited to have her, as I said, to be with us today. And so let's see. Let me grab her and see if I can get her in here. Hey, Mary Beth.
Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry for this little ordeal. What
Oh, you're okay.
I'm famous for these things. You should have seen how I started my web webinars. The first several months, I would have major technical disasters every time of one sort or another. Oh, geez whiz.
Well,
Anyway, I apologize profusely, but hey, we're here.
no, you're all good, and I just looked at the clock, and it's just about 4:20, so perfect timing.
Thank God. It's been one of those days. What happened? I
Oh,
had an unexpected journey, and it was, too far out of town. And of course, I had no idea they were doing so much road construction, which is all lovely when it's done, but during during these sorts of days, so oh my God, yeah.
yeah, well, I'm really glad you're here now. I'm glad you're safe, and there was, you were able to get here, and it's no worries, honestly. That's just how it goes. That's the nature of
We're living
this
la vida loca.
too.
Yeah.
It's just like you gotta pivot, you gotta be on your toes, you never know what's gonna
That's
happen.
it. Oh God. I
So
used to play volleyball in my youth. That was fun. Lots of pivoting, lots of being on your toes.
nice, so you're used to it.
Yeah. Oh God.
Well, cool. I just want to say thanks for being here, and I'm really excited to talk with you. I heard you on Growcast for the first time just a couple months ago because a friend of mine actually sent me a link to one of your shows on Growcast and said, "Hey, I think you'd really like this lady. You
Oh,
should check
how
her out."
sweet.
Yeah, and so I'm so stoked to have found you and Growcast because it's all right up my alley, and I'm honored to have you here.
Well,
And
thank you.
so, if you would, for people who aren't familiar with you, could you just give yourself a little intro and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you found yourself in the position you're in as a horticulturist and working with cannabis and an IPM specialist?
Well, long ago and far away, I was actually born into a farming family. So I had a, sort of a little bit of natural background with the whole raising the plants and that whole thing. And as far as that goes, I worked a lot in that industry in the packing house, mostly, that where they're after the fruit is harvested, getting it into the boxes to go. But I also did get that appreciation for the plants, and my grandparents were horticulturalists, and they, fancy gardens all around their house. So they inspired me a lot. So I knew in the family that it was in the blood. So anyway, when I was taking career classes, I was asked to fantasize about my dream ideal job, and it would definitely and it have to be something to do with plants, raising plants, or living in a greenhouse or something. So following that, I had already been on my own studying plants and their various mannerisms and things all my life. One of the best books I ever read in high school was called Roots, and it wasn't the Alex Haley book. It was about plant roots, and it was just plant roots. The whole book was the most fascinating thing you can imagine. I was like, oh my gosh, there's just so much going on that we don't know in the world, and when you're that age and your hormones are raging, it's very exciting to learn these new things and new universes start opening up to you. And I really dove into the plant thing. So as the years went by, I went to college and took many courses in horticultural, all the ones that they had at the college that my college offered. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough time and years in my life to take all the general education courses they would have wanted me to take to get my, degrees with the letters and all. But I did learn quite a lot. And I eventually got a job working in a nursery up here where I live now in Northern California. And I did manage that nursery for about 10, 11 years before that store finally closed down. But it was another really important learning experience, particularly because this area turned out to be uh, a real cannabis growing haven. So I really got immersed in that particular plant specifically. But, I was in the general purpose nursery where we grew all kinds of plants and sold all kinds of plants. So we still had that, thankfully, that a well-rounded background as far as the plant care goes.
Yeah, that's great. I love that about your experience because just, listening to a couple of your shows and then reading your bio even, I love that you have the vast experience with the cannabis and a multitude of other crops
Yeah,
because I just think it's so important and there's crossover, but then there's so many nuances to each plant and they all have their own personality. As you said, you picked up on these nuances about them from a young age, so when you
yeah.
have that experience, oh, that's so glorious to know, that's kind of like the upbringing that you were able to experience because it makes sense too, the position you're in now. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, every once in a while when I'm feeling stressed out, I call on the ancestors. Help me out with this one.
Yes.
Because I know they're backing me up, you know what I mean? There was a little history there in the family of it. If they weren't professional horticulturalists, it was their full-time hobby off duty, you know what I mean? So there was a lot of that just going on in the family.
Yeah, I love hearing that. That's one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, you know, um, because you were immersed in this lifestyle since your youth, what are some of the things you learned from your family, that you still practice today in your own gardens? Are there things that really stand out to you that you're like, oh, I remember when grandpa did that or my dad did that or something?
I do remember the first time I saw my grandfather pruning a rose bush, and I just flipped out because I thought, my God, you can't be cutting it back that far. Are you insane? There was nothing left at all. And I could not believe how that thing grew back. It just was like, oh my God, this thing is huge and beautiful and fresh and lovely and perfect. And like, and it grew back so fast. Like, wow, that's like, okay, I learned you can prune the hell out of things and they can grow back a lot better after the process, if, particularly with a lot of trees. And in fact, one of the things I learned recently that kind of I thought was interesting was like, when deer go to bite on your favorite rose bush or something, they actually have something in their saliva that stimulates the growth on that place where they bit. So it'll shoot out more branches.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, that was trippy. So it'll shoot out more branches that way than if you came along with clippers and just cut it. Like, yeah, I guess that's the deer's way of making sure plenty
Co-
of your rose bush is
They're like
hitting.
damage control.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Here, I'll make up for it by a
Oh,
little trade-off.
that's beautiful. That's like one of those little beautiful things about nature, how it just like everything you ends up making sense, even though in the moment it doesn't make any sense at all, you know?
Yeah. And things can be more forgiving than you realize. One of the things I learned in my early horticulture experience, I was doing a whole lot of, landscaping type yard work when I was growing up and I was young and still super healthy. One of them strapping lasses. I'd go around and do these things all day long. But I learned that you could really do a lot more damage to a plant than you can imagine, and the plant still thrives. Like particularly if you have to take a big root ball and chop it up into like 4 or 5 parts just to get new plants, and you'd think, wouldn't that just destroy it? You're chopping it up with an axe or something. But no, it's perfectly fine. You just wash it off, put it in the ground, and off you go. And treat it properly, and then you have 4 plants instead of 1 plant. But it is pretty impressive the first time you watch someone, like, for instance, I have relatives who are just terrified of pruning any branches on any trees. And I'm like, you really should. You really need to prune a lot of those branches. Some of them are dangerous. You know what I mean? Where they're going to kill you. They're going to come down. But
Yeah.
there's that fear of pruning that people have. And, you really can go deep, and your tree will. Well, you've seen pollarding. You probably know what pollarding is, when they prune a tree way to hell back, way down a branch. And then out of that branch will come all kinds of little small branches, and they'll have a constant supply of these little twig branches. And this is what they used to use to make their wattle and daub houses back in the old days, where they weave sticks together and throw mud and crap on it to make a building, build a building. You know what I mean? You can build anything with wattle and daub, and it's fun stuff. But they needed a constant supply of those bendable twigs. So the way they would do that is to prune the tree back to a ridiculously huge branch, and have all kinds of little small branches that would just grow out every year, because you do this every year.
Yeah, no.
Constant supply of firewood, whatever, what you need.
Totally. And it's kind of like there's a clearing that happens. Like it's just like when you get a haircut sometimes, you can tell
Yep.
your hair might need it. And I know there's all different schools of thought. I don't cut my hair very often. There's some women that don't cut their hair ever. There's some men that don't cut their hair ever. But I always notice a difference. There's like a buoyancy that comes, there's a freshness that
That's
happens,
true.
and then you can actually promote growth more,
Oh yeah.
like more
Yeah,
healthy
I
growth.
rarely cut my hair, and then you'll notice the split ends come. And there was a time in my life when the split ends were so bad that my hair was getting shorter without me even cutting it. And it was like, that's when I just got, oh my God, I have to have a haircut. And I got my hair cut pretty short. That I put everybody who knew me into shock. But, I think that's the last time I got a severe haircut. I had maybe done some split end trimming since then. But yeah, my hair it grows to about 1 spot and stays there. Doesn't go any further. Right in the middle of my back. That's it. That's it.
Nice. That's awesome. So I'm curious about what your inspiration was to begin to dive into IPM and how it has revolutionized the way you grow and the way you look at plants and even your relationship with plants.
Oh, well, originally when I was doing my college classes, that was one of the ones, of course, that you had to take if you wanted to get your full dosage of every horticultural class that they offered there. And they had a really good IPM class there, and it was kind of inspirational. Of course, I'm the kind who doesn't ever sell back my textbooks. I keep all my textbooks. I like this information, and I, studied more as the years went by. But what really got more into it is when I was working at the nursery for all those years, because people were always coming into the nursery with their plant problems. And so basically what I'm most well versed in are the local pest problems for where I live, which unfortunately people will often come to me with some bug I've never seen before. There's so many thousands and millions in the world. And, You know what I mean? Every once in a while, you'll see one. I know what family it is, but I don't. I couldn't tell you exactly. But you can usually tell them enough about it to at least know if it's going to be a pest problem or a non-pest problem. But working at the nursery, particularly with the cannabis growers, they're very concerned if their plants have a problem because a huge amount of investment is involved there. And so they would be coming all the time saying, help me, what's wrong with my plants? So, it was my duty as the person who ran the nursery to have the most knowledge on the subject. So I made sure to just keep up the constant education, self-education, and sometimes going to seminars and things if there were such things ever offered. Yeah. And I was really fortunate to work for a woman who was really into keeping up with my education, as far as like if there ever was one of these things, for extra education that I should attend, she would always pay for me to go. And that was really nice having that support. She got me really into compost and compost tea and becoming really knowledgeable about that. And she was an employer who always insisted that her employees were knowledgeable and not just an idiot who ran a cash register. So she would
Right.
insist immediately that you read the really important books, such as teeming with microbes, teeming with nutrients, that kind of thing, and making sure that you could answer the questions that customers ask correctly. You had to know about indoor growing and outdoor growing. And yeah, she didn't want idiots behind the counter or anywhere else in the property. So that was very helpful. And through those years, I got a lot of support for anything that I wanted to try there, or um, like I said, or any kind of continuing education that I wanted to get. It was really nice.
That's awesome. When you do work for someone else, it's such a gift when you have somebody that's like that.
Yeah,
Um,
really appreciative. And that's how I got my microscope, which I still have to this day. Even though the store's closed, I got to keep the microscope. Yay.
Ooh, nice. Yeah, because 'cause you're looking at microbes and all the fungi and stuff
Yeah,
underneath the
yeah,
microscope,
because
right?
like I said, with that continuing education in the compost and compost tea, I got to learn how to use the microscope and identify the things that I could see in the soil and in the compost tea samples. And it was, fascinating. And that's another one of the things that I like to help people with online. If they decide to ask me questions, I can help them with a lot of that kind of stuff. 'Cause fortunately, it isn't usually too complex, unless you're trying to ask me what specific bacteria that is. You'd have to get a DNA test to tell. But thankfully, they have uh, physical characteristics that you don't need to know exactly, excuse me, which variety of, say, bacteria it is, but you need to know what shape it is. And that's the thing that tells whether it's a good, bad, or indifferent, shall we say.
Right, yeah. And so in terms of compost then, I do have a question, I guess,
Hmm.
because I'm always wondering, is it crucial or is it just important to keep your compost watered during the summer or dry times, or is that
You
just
do. You
yes.
want to maintain 50% humidity. And the best way to tell if you've got that well, there's two ways. You can get a moisture meter, which is handy, but different places in the pile, it's going to be a little different. Excuse me, I'm going to get a thing of water right here.
Yeah.
But excuse me, 50% moisture in your compost pile. If you take a handful of your, I'm assuming some sort of moisture is in the pile. If you take a handful of your compost and you squeeze it into your hand as hard as you possibly can, and you get out just the teeniest bit of water, like just one drop or just a little teeny bit come between your fingers, that's 50% moisture. If
Ah,
you're not getting any water, then you're less than 50%. And if you're getting a whole bunch of moisture squeezing out, then you're way over 50%. So that's kind of your in the field test without any other kind of meter. That's a simple way to tell because,
okay.
and you get a feel for what that exact, it's a lot like think of a sponge in your kitchen sponge. When you go to wring it out and you go wring all the moisture out, it's still wet, but it's not dripping anywhere. Right, you can still put it on a piece of paper and it'll still show a wet mark, but it's not dripping a drop of anything. And that's like 50% moisture. That's kind of like what you're looking for. And when you have a compost pile outside, if it's not covered, it tends to want to dry out, or if it rains, it tends to get too wet. So it's good to try to maintain that 50% humidity in the pile, do that first with your hose. It's got to have some drainage. So hopefully when you cover it up, it'll kind of maintain something at least close to that for ideally.
Nice. That's a great tip actually,
Mm.
because I have to say I don't always water it, and I think, okay, if I don't water it, is that the worst thing? But then when
Mm.
I think about what compost is, it's like, well, yeah, it probably really needs it all the time. So,
Yeah, they've got to have a certain amount. I mean, well, what'll happen to the microbes that are in it is they won't die, but they'll go dormant. So they'll sometimes when they go dormant, they'll just take their sweet time coming back. But usually they'll come back as soon as the temperature, the moisture gets right for them again. But here's the thing about compost tea that I should bring up on that subject, because different form bacteria and thing that you're growing in your compost and compost tea, they thrive at different temperatures. So that's why it's always recommended when you're making compost tea to make it in the same environment that you're going to be applying it in. For instance, if it's outdoors, make sure you're doing your brewing outdoors and basically the same temperature and humidity, because that's the way you're going to be growing the same microbes that'll be thriving on your plants. Like, a lot of people want to put their compost brewer inside a nice, cool, shady place because it's a lot easier to deal with on a hot day.
yeah.
But then what turns out to happen is that the microbes that are put out are only good at that temperature, and during the hot part of the day, the plant's got no protection. It's got really nothing
Right.
going on for it. So you need to put your brewer out in the sun. If you think, you don't want to necessarily be in the full sun, although you can be. If you're worried about that, put something over it, put a tarp over it, or you can put a little shed roof over it, but you basically want to keep that same temperature, the ambient temperature of the environment that you're growing in. So if you're indoors, if you can keep your brewer indoors, that's ideal too, because you'll have microbes thriving at every temperature that your room or your environment experiences.
I like that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm.
I've recently saw online, using eggshells, in the garden. That's like a very old
Right.
tradition or what have you. But
Right.
recently saw people like baking the eggshells and then adding vinegar to them to
Right.
like is that something that you do and then you like allow that solution to sit and then you're diluting it obviously to spray it onto the plants. But is that something that you would recommend people? I did hear you on Growcast talk about adding the calcium solution actually to the soil instead of onto the leaves, because
Yeah.
you were saying something about, which I thought was a very good advice, that the calcium can like prevent the photosynthesis because
Well,
it
it
will like
can kind
leave.
of clog up the leaves. Like, I mean, if you've ever had one of those misters and you put it out by a window or something, you'll notice after a while everything's kind of coated with this gray
Yeah.
film. This is all the mineral deposits. So the same thing happens on your plant leaves when too much mineral deposits just kind of clog up the works like your windows. So the thing to do is, yeah, every once in a while when you see a deficiency happen, go ahead and do a foliar spray. But as its main feeding, the roots is really the way the plant is designed to take it up and takes it up most efficiently.
Yeah.
And I was just going to say, you don't have to worry about when your stomata's open and all that kind of thing. If it's in there and in the soil, and particularly if you have a living soil, your plant's in charge and it'll take care of it. It'll happen.
Makes sense, and I just always think patience, patience has been one of the hugest lessons.
Oh, I'm telling you what, I was walking in the woods today with my husband, and we were saying that, the lesson of the trees is patience. I mean,
Oh, beautiful.
everything they do is slow motion. Oh, God, and it's true. That's the hardest virtue I know, patience. Whew.
I
I
know it.
struggle.
I
I
know it.
struggle all
And
the
that's why
time.
gardening to me has been such a gift on so many levels, but that patience
Yes.
element, is just so crucial because the amount of times too that I've put things out too early or you wanna just get things in the ground and then a frost comes again or
Yeah.
whatever
Oh, the
happens.
putting things out too early, yeah. People get backfired on that a lot because, like you said, frost will come that surprised them, or they didn't realize that it wasn't really going to grow that much more, and they wasted 2 or 3 months feeding it, that they didn't need to. It's little things like, yeah, that you don't necessarily do yourself a favor by going out too early, but a lot of times they don't realize that the temperatures are so much colder that the plant is kind of not thriving, and they wonder, why is my plant not thriving? They didn't put it together that the plant really needs a little higher temperature to get its mojo, get your
Yeah.
mojo running, and it does really make a difference.
Oh, for sure. Yes.
Just like me, I don't want to get out of bed till it's warm.
Yeah, that exactly. That makes sense, Why even put yourself through the torture?
Yes. Oh God.
So one of the things I heard you talk about also on Growcast, you said prevention before infestation, and
Oh
I
yeah.
just loved when you said that because I love that mentality for many aspects of life, not just in the garden, because
So
prevention
proactive care. Yeah. I mean, in
so
your own
crucial.
body, your own health. Yeah.
So
Your
if
own sanity counts.
Oh my god, it's so freaking crucial, because who wants to be scrambling at the last minute or
Oh, you see the panic attacks people will have, and sometimes, when they weren't paying attention, things will get way out of hand, and all of a sudden, "How do I fix this? Ha!" It never would have got out of hand had the practices been employed that, are preventative, which are, always tedious because then people have it in their mind, well, what if I don't get sick? Maybe I don't need this vitamin C. But you can't really quantify the colds you don't get, you know what I mean? So it's like, well, I haven't been sick for several years, so maybe it's working, but as soon as you stop taking it, I have recommended Dr. Symes to a lot of people because they want to know what they can spray in flowering. And it's the only thing I know that you can really spray in a plant in flowering that's safe. It won't hurt you to consume it. But it scares people because the whole concept of spraying anything in flowering terrifies them. So I have spent a lot of time with that, explaining to people how to use that properly. But so often people will bring you a flower to look at, and it is in flowering, and it's completely covered with russet mites, and they're in there eating the trichomes out, and it's like, the thing that you never ever want to see. And I feel so sorry for these people. It usually turns out that one of the things that they're doing, which they could have prevented, was they're way overfeeding.
Mm,
They really just, they're the kind of people, there's a lot of people who will just like see a pretty bottle and it's got a lot of neat flowers on it. Let's buy that. And it's a lot of people will do multiple fertilizers at once, not realizing you got to add those numbers up. You're getting a total of quite a bit more than sometimes they don't realize that each one of them adds up, and there you get way too much fertilizer. That's the main attractant of all those nasty pests, and they can get so out of hand, especially the ones that are microscopically small that you really can't see well at all with the naked eye unless you have a absolutely out of control infestation, which you don't ever want to get to that point. So, that's why I've always been telling people, recommending preventative spraying with something. If you're not into Dr. Symes, do something else. But if you're in flowering, that's the main thing I could do. Um, on the subject of russet mites, though, if nothing else is available, hot water or a hot room for like 20 minutes at 120 is supposed to kill them. But,
oh,
I don't know how to obtain those temperatures in my house. I hope to God the temperature's
thankfully.
never 120 where I live outside. Oh yeah, but it is a way to kill them without using any other chemical, just heat. But it is some people can obtain those temperatures. They have some little closet or something that they can get that hot. That should do the trick. And another trick for spider mites to think about too, with the environment involved, is if you have those two-spot spider mites, which are super, super common and easier to see with the naked eye, but still super tiny, especially in the young stages. But if you turn your temperature down for them, like, and make your room kind of cold, if possible, that slows down their breeding significantly, so that if you're treating them, you'll have a lot fewer reproducing during the period of time where you're trying to knock them down. That also helps a little in the
Interesting.
battle. But yeah, anything that you can do ahead of time. There are products like Grandevo. I don't know if you've ever heard of Grandevo. That's something that you can, it's a biological bacteria that you can put out in your environment before you really get your plants growing. It's not something that you would apply when you saw an infestation. This would be something that you have to put out when you're just first putting down seeds or preparing your soil or whatever, because you want it to be well established in your environment before any plants come or start getting going. And that's supposed to make sure that it somehow infects the pest spider mites and things so that they don't come thrips and things. I think it's also supposed to work for. I'm not 100% sure of the list, but if you look it up online, I'm sure you can check it out. Excuse me, just dropped
Okay.
something. Grandevo is the name of that product. But those kind
Devo,
of
like
biologicals, yeah, like a grand thing,
okay.
and Devo like da 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 da, crazy whip,
Whip
da
it.
da da da. Devo.
Oh, nice. Okay, because I've just was introduced to Dr. Zymes
Oh, I love
through
Dr.
you
Science.
guys hearing you talk about it, and I just ordered a sample of it to
So good.
just give it a chance, give it a
I
shot.
love the company. I love the product. But if
Awesome.
some people it's not necessarily available to them, or if they have some nervous feelings for whatever, I don't know why, but there are other options such as the thing like Grandevo that it for prevention of so many of those little pesty problems, particularly the ones that are so close to being invisible before, like thrips. Even when thrips in their young stage are, you have to have really good eyes to see those things. You have to get really close, and they are fast moving, and it's not until they're really adults that they're easy to spot. And then they're really fast moving, and then there's just tons of them, and like, oh shoot, then you really have a battle on your hands. So it's really, really a good idea to, give yourself the discipline to just like do some weekly preventative spraying of something really gentle and kind to your plant, like the Dr. Symes, or something easy to get along with, like the Grand Evo. You just put it out and basically forget it. I don't know if you put it out more than once a year. It's not real cheap, but you just have to kind of get it around the areas where you intend to grow things.
Okay, makes sense.
Uh-huh.
It reminds me of something else you talked about with grasshoppers and crickets.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say the another super good preventative thing. If you have those in your environment, it's the Nosema locustae is the name of the biological that will come in a form of. It'll look like bran or something as the carrier that it'll be sold to you on, and you'll spread this bran stuff around. And you want to put this all around the perimeters of your garden. You don't want to really put it on the plants that you love, because this is going to attract them, but it's also going to infect them with this thing that's specific to that species, like the locust species, which are all the grasshoppers and crickets and katydids and that sort of thing, that have those big hoppy legs. They're so cute. They are beautiful insects, but God, they can be destructive.
Yes.
And yeah, we do have, where I live, a lot of issues with the crickets or the grasshoppers, because we have a real woody area, lots of big fields and places where they can just grow and be happy. And when you have a lovely garden, they start looking at it and salivating. Oh, that looks nice right over there. So I find myself chasing them around and just, doing things with brooms. And well, when I found the Nosema locustae, it comes under a couple of brand names that use. One was Semaspore, all one word,
Okay.
and the other was Nolo, just Nolo. I think for Nosema locustae, and they are only available, I believe, in springtime, in early spring, because of it's the life cycle, I guess, of this biological entity. I want to call it a bacteria, but it might be a fungus. I'm not 100% positive. I'll say the wrong thing. But it is alive, and it doesn't have any shelf life. So you cannot hardly ever go to a store and just hope to see it on the shelf. That you usually have to always order it special. This, if a store does have anything on its shelf, it's the store that expects it to be sold really quickly, so they know they have an audience for it. But it really is effective at getting the population down of those things. As the years went by at the nursery, I used to put that around the perimeters every year, and it really made a difference. It's like, we didn't have near the issues. It wasn't like I was wiping them off the face of the earth. It's not that kind of eradication, but
Right.
you get them down to a manageable level. We can live with that.
Yeah, so necessary. That's the thing. Like, I mean, out here where we live in the Columbia Gorge on the Washington side.
Oh,
And
nice.
yeah, we love it here. And we're in the same situation where we're bordered by woods, and so there's just we are in the domain of the critters.
Yes, we are.
This is their domain. So we've entered, so they're allowing us to kind of,
Yeah.
commingle or whatever. But for me, it's been voles, like woo. And I've found some things that work. They seem to really hate castor oil, and it's really
Yes.
interesting. Yeah.
That's one of the things we used to sell at the nursery was called Mole Max, and it's this castor
Mhm.
oil based thing that's when you put it out, it just really repels the rodents, the soil rodents, the voles, the moles, the gophers. We used to have some customers that would come in, and they were desperate for some kind of poison to kill the gophers, and my boss was very much of an animal lover, and so she would be fighting for the gophers. And she said to some customers, "Look, I'll take you take this. I'm not even going to charge you for it. You take this and you try it, and you tell me if this didn't work for you." And they came back later and they said, "Yep, all the gophers went to my neighbors."
Yeah, that's the thing with it. Literally just pushing them out,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
extending their
yeah.
boundary.
You better just tell your neighbor to get some too, and
Yeah.
keep them moving on down the line. I swear. Well, my husband and I were talking the other day about where are all the gopher snakes. When we grew up, we used to see gopher snakes all the time, and that was a good control for the gophers and those sorts of rodents. And we just hardly ever see them anymore. I don't know what's happened. The other day we were walking across a path and we actually saw a little one. It was like, wow. It's been years, literally years since I've seen a gopher snake. It seems like something's wrong with their population. I don't know what it is.
Huh. Interesting.
Mm.
Yeah, one thing I learned too with voles is that I ended up planting castor bean plants actually, like
Oh,
around the perimeter.
oh,
And then actually also like within on the perimeters of each bed. And
mm.
they really don't like that either because then the roots of the plant actually permeate that scent.
Good thinking,
Yeah.
girl.
Oh my goodness. I was like, it's working. Like
Good thinking.
the Frankenstein moment of like,
Oh,
it's
I tell
alive.
you, they're good. And you know what else they don't like is strong smells, such as anything that's like gasoline,
Ah.
rotten onions or garlics, things like that. What's often recommended is if you get something like that soaked on a towel and put it in their holes, then you can really make them run away doing stuff like that. If you can't find enough mole max at your local store, or well, you don't have a castor bean plant handy, things like that will be really repulsive to them. Apparently, they don't like strong smells.
Okay, I like that. That's a good tips too because I'm always on the lookout. I swear. They're like I've tried to make deals with them too and
Oh, I tell you, I
the
had
halfway deal.
last year, I had a man gave me as a donation just out of the kindness of his heart because he liked me, um, a ton of seeds for free, just tons of them. And I made beautiful little seed balls and I planted seeds and I did starts and I planted things in the ground. And every single thing that we planted, the gophers got
Mm.
before it was harvest. And it just was like, wow, I have to get my raised beds together before I even try again. It's never been that bad before. It's like I always figure I'll plant some enough for me and the gophers, right? This year it was like that year, I would say this year I haven't even bothered. Last year though, I was like, wow, it just, I thought I'd get something. I got about 2 squashes maybe.
Ugh. I
But what
know it.
we do have other food plants here, though. Thankfully, we have lots of fruit trees and grapes and currants and things like that, where we did get that kind of stuff. But gee whiz, man, the gophers last year, I've never thought I had to have everything in raised beds, but now I'm going, yeah, I gotta have everything in raised beds. But you know what I'm observing? They're not taking strawberries.
That I
Strawberries,
have
they
the
seem to
same
not be taken down. Yeah, so maybe
yep.
get a lot more ground cover of strawberries going on.
Yes, I was gonna say that's what I've observed too. They do not touch the strawberries.
Seems like it because they're always there, and I never see them pulling a strawberry down.
Yeah,
They
it's
go all
interesting.
around it pulling other things down, the strawberries.
I wonder, part of me wonders if, because strawberry leaf itself and other
Mm.
parts of the plant are kind of astringent. I wonder if they are kind of repelled by that flavor because, they love most everything, but they really love broccoli and cabbage and all those like the sweet peas and things like that. So I'm wondering, maybe strawberries for some reason they just don't have a palate for it or something, which I'm grateful for because
I
Lord.
don't know what it is. I'm grateful too. I know strawberries can tend to have gigantic root systems. And that might be something that's off-putting for them when they're doing
Mm.
their digging, that they're very a lot of little roots everywhere.
Yeah, that's actually not a good or not a bad thought. It might, and
Mm.
maybe they are eating some of it, but it's such a huge root system that it doesn't.
Yeah, it
It doesn't
becomes unappealing.
yeah, I'm
There's
good here.
too much going on. Have you ever gotten bare root strawberries to plant?
No.
That's when I realized what their root system was really like. I got some bare root strawberries to plant at the nursery one time,
Mhm.
and unless you sell them right away, you gotta pretty much put them in a pot, and the only pots that I had to put them in were, like, 4-inch pots because they were just little one plant at a time, and I had this huge just root system on every single plant. It was killing me to cut this thing off because it was, like, 2 feet almost, at least 18 inches of root,
Wow.
and, I'd have to cut it down to, like, a couple of inches to squeeze it into those little pots and resell them. Oh god, that was a crying shame, honey. Especially for a girl who didn't like to cut her hair.
Yeah, I can sympathize with that one too.
Oh lord, that was luscious growth was just, oh. But I've noticed that the strawberries that we have here, we don't ever need to plant more. They just keep moving around all by themselves. Every once in a while, my husband will get some runners and go put them elsewhere. And so we've got a patch here and a patch there and a patch here. And this patch has always remained. The gophers never take them down.
Hmm.
Starting to think more strawberries. Okay, girl.
Yeah, totally. Oh my goodness.
I don't get tired of them too. Oh, they're good.
Gosh, I have so many questions for you. I have so many directions I feel like we could go, but,
This
you
is
know
true.
wait, go ahead. Go ahead. Say what were you gonna say?
Oh no, I said this is true. We can montage.
Oh my god, because 'cause I'm like, I prepared questions and I know what's been going on too with all these interviews. It's like you prepare questions, you ask a question, then it goes in a different direction, and then you're like, "Oh, I wanna talk about that. Now I wanna talk about that."
Yeah,
But
I'm terrible for getting off subject.
well, this is beautiful. I'm loving it because I love having the free flow kind of,
Good girl.
like
Good
see where
girl.
it goes. But you bringing up raised beds, I have to ask. So I don't remember the exact pronunciation of this method of gardening, but it's like Herxmeyer or something where you like lay down wood, like
It's like
logs.
Hugel culture.
What is it called?
Hugel culture.
Hugel culture. Okay, I was way
Yeah,
off.
yeah. Yeah, well, people might call it by more than one thing, so don't
That's
beat yourself
true.
up.
Okay. That I won't do, but I wanna ask your opinion on that
Yeah,
method
love it.
because
In fact, that's exactly what we want to do out here
okay,
because we
sweet.
have so many branches and things to work with because we're, in the woods and the fires, how they've been on the West Coast. So
Oh,
we're doing fuels reduction all the time. So we've got all kinds of material to work with. And it's a fantastic thing, not only to fill up extra space in the planter itself, but as it's decomposing, it's releasing all the nutrients. And we're assuming, that you're going to have a living biology in there because it's really conducive to living biology in there. Earthworms and the bacteria and the fungi and all those things. They're going to love that environment. So the more you can do it, almost like chinking, where you have the big pieces of wood at the bottom, the smaller pieces of wood on top of that. Then you add the leaves and add any kind of compost or whatever that you have, but get as many big pieces as you can before you start putting in all the smaller things to fill up the space, because over the years, as it decomposes, of course, the pile's going to get lower and you'll put more and more compost on the top, or, hopefully assuming that you're making compost. But it's a fantastic system, a great way. And I don't think you ever have to really feed these things, like as far as extra fertilizer and things, unless you have some great urge to do so, because normally they're just working on recycling the nutrients of the plant that lived before it. And they're so carbon heavy. And most plants really love a lot of carbon source. It seems to be a really good system. And yeah, I'm anxious to get these beds started. But we've been so busy with things, this and that, and something always comes up. So, we still haven't got it done yet. But yeah, that's my plan. That's the plan in the works.
Yeah.
Hugelkultur beds, they're not real complicated. And they're real nice, because if you do want to add them, add something to them, just dig it in, you add it in. If you're into bokashi composting, that's, one of the great things to add into a system like that is bokashi, because it helps to break down the bigger, heavier, harder things, the more carbon heavy things better. So that's like, they're a marriage made in heaven there. And I've recently gotten into, making even my own bokashi, which saves you a little bit of money from buying it, although buying it is quite convenient, I must say, because it's ready to go right out of the bag. Where when you make your own, you've got to let it sit around for a while, and you got to hope that you didn't, let the air in. You've got to have those kind of airlock things when you're making it that'll let the gases out without oxygen coming in. Otherwise, you ruin it all. Like, oh, doggone it. But it is a fantastic thing when it comes out right, which, it's usually not too hard to get the hang of it.
Cool. Yeah, the hugel culture then, that's my goal then for this fall to
Yes, I'm
yeah.
with you.
Yeah, exactly. Start laying it down, because I do know too that, everything I've researched about it, it takes a little time for that kind of to start
Correct.
really,
Yeah.
forming. And it reminds me of so we this year built a brand new garden fence, but we did a dead hedge fence, which
Mm.
is very similar to what you were talking about in the beginning of the wattle
Yeah.
fences.
Waddle, yeah.
And what it basically becomes is this hugel culture, because you can grow inside the fence.
That's perfect.
It's so awesome, and when I was, like,
It's
learning about this, I'm like, "Oh my god, this is basically the fencing that we did," because there's
right.
people that you can, research it online or whatever, and they actually the top layer will be compost, because they've just been you add just your leaves and your trimmings and whatever, you just put it in there, and it begins to form
It's
compost.
decomposing. Yeah, you're making good compost. The worms will come. If you have anything in there that is, bacteria rich, like worms seem to be particularly attracted to cardboard, to chicken manure, to melon rinds, and things that attract a lot of bacteria, because really what the earthworms are doing are not so much eating those things, they're eating the bacteria that's on those things. And in order to get all the bacteria off, they've got to macerate it into tiny little bits of nothing, so you don't recognize it anymore. You think that they're eating really the melon, but they're just chewing it up so they can suck off the bacteria. So bacteria is really what they want, but they do decompose these things for us, and they release nutrients, and they create more nutrients in the soil. They're nutrient multipliers. So when the earthworms start coming, you shouldn't have to feed any more supplemental nutrients. I'd be surprised if your plants showed a deficiency of anything.
Mm.
It's a great system. I'm anxious to get it started, and maybe I'll start videoing the process. I
Oh,
keep
you
thinking I'm going to
should.
do something, and then I go, yeah, no, I'm not. Maybe I am. No, I'm not.
Yeah, I know that feeling. There's so many times where I'm like, "Okay, I should record while I'm doing," and then I take out even the phone and I take a tripod and then I, like, did it, and then I'm like, "Oh, shit. Okay,
I
well, I
forgot,
did do that,
or
but
yeah,
I got it
or
done."
I'm not in the picture at all. Like, oh well.
You know, it's
Okay.
really funny this day and age with, content and how it all
Uh,
goes. It's
uh-huh.
so interesting.
I'll tell you what. The struggle is real.
It really is. It really is. It's been an interesting journey for sure on my end as well because I've never been very computer wise or anything like that, but
Oh,
I
yeah.
find myself that here we are in this time and it seems so natural almost, but not natural. It's this weird in between
Yeah, you're
sometimes.
right. Just like
Mhm.
those little glitches like I had this afternoon, I need a grow, money, look at this. Okay, okay, I'm sorry, I'm late because I'm technically weaselly. But once I get it on, then I'm good. I can handle it. It's just a new thing. I'm an old dog.
Yeah. Nice. That's funny. Well,
Yeah.
I have to ask, there's have you heard of you probably have been and it's like really making a return now this year, but electroculture.
I just recently got turned on to that and I thought, "Oh, that's cool." And it makes sense because everything is what? Electrons, protons, neutrons, everything is electricity. It just makes sense. There's nothing on the planet that isn't made of electricity, spinning
Right.
around our little atoms. And I have seen many pictures where, the people have their coils in the ground and they say the higher you go up, the better. But I've noticed that the plants that are the closest to the coil are much larger than the plants that are the furthest away. And there's that gradual progression, and so you can definitely see it's making a difference. It's the only variable in the whole scene, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely.
And so that is super interesting to me, and it makes a lot of sense to me. I've also seen some programs where people do batteries from the earth because there is electrical energy in the earth that you can tap into and get out small amounts to power small things. I'm sure if they learned how to tap into it, more efficiently, they could maybe get more out to do more things. But at this point, they're just powering small things with it. But it's really interesting because you have to line up your things in the ground, your rods that you're putting in, and they have to be facing, I think, towards the north.
Yep, north
And
south. Yep.
yeah, and the one furthest, I can't remember. It makes a difference which one is furthest and closest to the thing that you're charging up. But it's fascinating because, like, yeah, it's out there. There's so much to the world that we haven't learned yet. Like, oh my god, don't get me started on the mushrooms and on the herbs, the herbal medicine. God, there's
Oh,
just so
let's
much,
start.
so much. We could go all day, girl.
Well, I know we could. No, I'd love to get into that stuff with you at some point because
Yeah.
that's where that's one of my most, greatest interest is the herbal medicine.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, I've been an herbalist for over 10 years now, which sometimes blows my mind that it's been that long, but
Yes.
to me, and one of the things I did want to talk to you about and is plant communication and
Yes.
what's some of your what are some of your strongest allies, plant allies in general? And then, once you started realizing that there is this plant language that happens,
Yeah.
what were some of your experiences, or do you have anything that stands out to you when we're, talking about more of the etheric realm of plants and their energies and stuff?
When I was pretty young, I think probably in my teens, I remember reading The Secret Life of Plants and looking about how plants communicate, and how they could pick up their different vibrations, hooking them up to polygraph machines and different things like that. And I was absolutely fascinating. And, that was around the time when I took talking to my plants seriously and singing to the plants and, just communicating with them in that kind of way, treating them like friends, and they respond, appropriately, and they don't seem to suffer transplant shock, and they recover easily from mishaps and what have you. But another thing that I learned some years ago, which I thought was absolutely also incredibly fascinating, is in the soil via the mycorrhizal fungus, the plants communicate that way like a telegraph line. It's almost like it's their Wi-Fi, their
Yeah.
their Google. It's with the mycorrhizal and the soil, and from plant to plant for as many miles as those mycorrhizas reach, they can communicate with each other and let each other know if trouble is coming down the pike. Get yourself ready and whatever power that you have to do so. There were some plants in some African country, I can't remember which one. They're acacias, and they were growing incredibly toxic to the the gazelles and things that were trying to eat them, who wouldn't normally have been eating them, but they were having such a bad drought that that was the only thing they had at all to eat. And before, these plants didn't have that high level of toxicity in them, but after the animals started eating on them for a while, the plants started to tell the other plants, "Yoo-hoo, we have a problem," and they all raised their toxicity levels, and so they started killing off all the animals that they previously hadn't been killing. And the scientists figured out what was happening. Like, why are they all just dying? Well, look at the levels of the toxin in that acacia plant, how it has risen. And they thought about how it had happened and somehow figured it out that this is the plants communicating with each other. It's a
Wow.
trip. They got a self-defense mechanism. Like, yeah, get your chitin up, kids. The bugs are coming.
Yeah, wow, that's really cool. I mean, I'm not surprised one bit, actually. That's really awesome. I mean, it's kinda like what we talked about in the beginning with the deer having, plant growth,
Right? The hormone that makes it
stimulation in their
grow better.
saliva.
Yeah. Kinda cool.
So awesome.
I don't have to be as upset when it happens.
So who are some of your greatest plant allies, would you say? Like, do you have a few that you turn to, during certain times of life, or have there been plants?
Besides cannabis.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, cannabis can be one because I
Cannabis,
would.
oh god, what a panacea. What a gift from God. I kid you not, in so many ways. Not only for the medicinal benefits, but for all the ways that hemp can heal the planet. Oh my God.
I'm
We
with
could
you.
go for days on that one too. Jesus, fuel fiber, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Building materials. There's nothing you can't do with it. But as far as like, oh, recently I had an experience that I thought was fascinating when I had just given a lecture on the webinar series I was doing for a while. And I did it two parts because there's so much to talk about when you talk about herbal medicine. And I was trying to give people an idea of plants that grow around, that you can find just everywhere. You don't have to go out of your way to find them. It's like weeds that you can probably find where you are almost anywhere in the world. So that was kind of my focus. I wanted to make it real easy for people to realize, hey, if a supply chain breaks down, you're going to be all right because you're going to be
Yeah.
able to get what you need. And it wasn't too long after that I had started to suffer from some kind of inflammation in a tooth or in my mouth. And in the jaw and the tooth. I don't know exactly where it was, but it was really, really hurting from there. And I remembered my own lecture that I had talked about plantain and how much that is known for being the thing for any mouth inflammation of any kind. Anything oral going on, plantain's the thing you want. And for other things too, but it's especially good at that. So I said, you know what? I've never tried it before in my real life, but I think I'm going to do that right now because this is really hurting. Like I couldn't close my mouth all the way without the bottom teeth hurting from the
Ooh.
pressure. And then this is not cool. This is not normal. I don't think I want to pay money to a dentist. I don't want to go to the dentist. What's good? They're going to tell me I need a root canal. What's going on? So I was starting to get worried about this. So I did just what they said. Uh-oh. Oh, hold on, Cindy. I'll call you back. Sorry about that.
You're all right.
Um, I chewed the stuff up, put it in my mouth, and held it in there like a poultice on the area that was affected by pain, and just held it in there with my teeth clenching it together. And I'm noticing while I'm clenching it that I'm clenching and it's not hurting. And then the more I held it in there, the more I'm like, I can clench really hard and it's not hurting. And I'm really doing this. I'm like, this is really doing it. It's taking all the pain away. It's taking all the inflammation away. I did that one day, and I did it one other day. For a little while the next day, and then it's just completely cleared up the issue. I don't need any worries at all. No pain, nothing. The tooth is totally normal. Closing and opening the mouth, everything's normal. It's like, wow, plantain is no joke. Herbal medicine is no joke.
It's true. It's not to be underestimated, really, and I think it
Mhm.
it gets underestimated a lot, especially in mainstream culture. But, what I'm finding is that it seems to me that there's just like this overwhelming want for more information, about this stuff. Like more people who
Yeah,
wouldn't be interested or weren't interested in it even 2 years ago are all of a
correct.
sudden, finding themselves being like, "Well, maybe I will find out how that works or what
Right,
the
and
deal is."
it's like almost every plant you can think of has a medicinal quality to it, and you just have to figure out what it is.
Right.
Because I've just looked through book after book, and they have so much variety of things that are, yeah, just it's gotten to the point where I'll just look up a plant and see what is its medicinal qualities because there's almost always something. I mean, even in things like your pine trees and things, there's good medicine in pine needle tea, in the tea of I want to say strawberries. All of the berries, drinking their leaves teas are really good. Uh, Even if you have pain, the poppy seed, opium tea from
Yes.
it is just a godsend. And if you can't get that, there's a wild lettuce that's just as good if you have to have it. When you have a pain that just can't be beat with normal things, sometimes you just got to have a little extra relief. It's really a gift to know that you can just go out in your yard and get it without having to go ask somebody to give you a prescription or go spend $1,000 for a bottle. Something, I only need this for a day or two, then I'm good. Whatever happens, spazzed out the back or something like that. Those days are like, oh yeah, we're gonna be fine.
Right. And the funniest thing about it, it's not funny at all, but the interesting, ironic thing about most of the
Mm.
pharmaceutical stuff is that it's most all of them are based on plants anyway.
Yeah, but they don't want to tell you that. They can't make profit off of that.
Right, and so I just find that this information it's always been very important to share, but I feel like now more so than ever because the interest is being resparked and
Yeah.
it's really cool because I have people even in my family that would never have asked me questions about herbal medicine.
It's so funny. I had one of my older brothers visited me a couple of weeks ago, and I'm walking around the garden. I'm going, and this plant, you can do this and this. And he's going, don't make me any. I don't want your funny teas. Like, okay. But, I'm looking at almost every plant growing out there, even the weeds, every single one has some medicinal value that's like, so I know it looks like I just got a bunch of weeds, but they're medicine.
Yep, and I just love the classic thought of, the plants that grow around you are typically the plants that you need the most.
Yeah.
So if all of a sudden, something pops up that wasn't there last year and it's a volunteer, well, that's probably a plant that's worth looking into and sitting with and asking the
Gifts from the
question.
universe.
Yep.
Oh, we like to consume cannabis in this household, and we use a vaporizer, so we're being tender with ourselves. But mullein grows everywhere here, and what's the best thing for any bronchial issues? Mullein, of course. So
Yep.
that's like God's gift is always right in front of you. But even the plantain grows everywhere. It's right in front of you. If you need some chamomile, if you need some all these little things, even the comfrey, if you've got a broken bone, make sure it's in the right position before you put the comfrey on because it starts setting the bone so quickly. You don't want it to
Yeah.
be set crooked. You know what I mean? That's what they say about comfrey, that it works so quickly to help your bones grow back together when they've been broken. And I'm like, how can a poultice do this? But it does. It's famous for it.
Yeah,
It's one of those herbs that you don't wanna use internally, I'll have to warn you. It can be, and people have done it without hurting themselves, but other people have hurt themselves, so externally with the comfrey for best results. But amazing, he can heal the skin and the bones very, very quickly. And, if you're out in the woods and you're nowhere near a hospital and you just hurt yourself real bad with the chainsaw, well, let's see. We do have options, we do.
Yeah, we definitely do, and I think it's just, there's, like, a comfort in it for sure, and I think a lot of it too is releasing fear because I think a lot of the, reasons why people don't turn to plants or whatever is out of fear, or there's not enough, certification, there's not enough certificates
Oh, yeah.
behind someone's
Oh, yeah. I
name
have
or,
taken
whatever.
poppy pods to some friends who had terrible pain, and I told them how to use it, very easy to make a tea. and they're just terrified of the thought of using a plant. It didn't come in a pill form. It didn't come out of the pharmacy. They just are terrified of the thought, and it's sad to me because, geez, it works fantastic. You save yourself a fortune, and you really there's no temptation for me to use them irresponsibly. If you're going to be the person that does that kind of thing, you're going to do it anyway with something else. But the average person isn't trying to turn themselves into a junkie. You know what I mean?
Yep.
You're just trying to relieve a pain that's real when you have it,
Yeah.
or treat some other existing condition. That so many varieties of conditions.
Yeah, and talk about preventive medicine, how we were
Mm,
talking about preventing pests early
mm.
on. I mean, if you're okay with consuming herbs and using herbs and stuff, I feel as though they are some of the most preventative medicine that you can actually come across ever.
Have you been turned on to moringa,
I
the
have
moringa tree, the moringa
I
leaves?
know about it, but I do not work with it personally.
Okay, I know it doesn't grow where I live. I doubt if it grows where you live
Yeah.
if you're even further north. But apparently if you can grow it and it'll just grow all year round and you can absolutely live on it. And plus it's got so many health benefits. It's definitely a superfood. I would not have any hesitation to buying, dried leaves that somebody else grew if I knew, assuming they were growing it organically. But I can't imagine it's not a pest prone tree, so it shouldn't need to be covered with pesticides, but hopefully. I know some people who were getting branching out because they didn't want to be a one trick pony with their cannabis thing, especially in California where the market crashed.
Yeah.
They said, "I'm going to grow moringa." Good for you. Hopefully, they're down in LA area or somewhere where it's always warm and you can do that kind of thing and grow it year round. It's fantastic. Plants like that, yeah, super good preventative medicine, things you can take every day. Chia seeds. Chia seeds prevents all kinds of troubles and cures all kinds of troubles. And it's one of those things you could take it every day.
Yeah, there's so
Tonic
many
type
things.
herbs. There's a lot of
Yep.
tonic type herbs. I remember talking about them where, they really don't start having much effect until after you've been taking them for a couple of months, and then you really start to notice their benefits. And there's quite a few like that, but still, once you start seeing the benefits, it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And,
Oh, milk thistle and toxicity. I had a friend who was going through the cancer treatments, and she was on so many medications because cancer treatments, and she had issues besides that. And at one point, when they were checking her liver, they said, "Your liver's kind of looking bad. We've got some spots, and we're concerned about your liver." And she asked me, "Marybeth, what do you think I should do?" And I said, "Get your milk thistle and start pounding it like nobody's business. At least 800 milligrams a day, more than once a day, maybe even." And she went back later and they looked at her liver again, said she's good. They had never seen a recovery like that. And this is just a weed, milk thistle,
Yep.
you know, but it really, really, really works. Saved her from all kinds of trouble because when you're on that many drugs, your liver is really, really working hard to try to process it all. It's a
Yeah.
hell of a thing for people who have to take medications. Get your milk thistle, save your life.
Man, I know. I just think about the bombardment on the body and
Yeah.
how resilient it can be in terms of the bombardment that we all experience, even on environmental levels
Oh,
around, air quality, what have you. It's just kind of all compounding these days. So all of these little tips like that for even someone who isn't going through cancer treatment or whatever, or
yeah.
on a lot of pharmaceuticals, it's just like
Yeah.
remembering these little things are little gems. So I'm grateful for you bringing that up because, yeah, people who listen to this might not know about it. And that's the reason why I love having these conversations because, we've
Yeah.
done a little roundabout here and it's been so excellent. And there's all these little tidbits in here that I know I want to continue pulling strings with you, but I also want to respect your time as well. And I want to, at the end here, just go into bees a little bit because
Oh, the bees.
you're a
Yeah.
beekeeper, correct?
Yeah, we
Okay.
do.
Yeah. And so if you want to expand a little bit just on your relationship with bees and, what you notice about them, and how long you've been a beekeeper for.
Well, we actually just started getting into the habit around the beginning of 2020 when a friend of ours came over because she was a beekeeper, and beekeepers are always expanding their operations, and then pretty soon you run out of room for all these hives. So she said to my husband, "You want a couple of hives?" So he took a couple of hives. So he started doing it, and then I started helping him with them. And as time has gone by, I help him more and more. But it's been so fascinating reading and learning about their lifestyles and collecting the honey and getting that lovely taste at the end of the year when they always make way more honey than they can use. And if you know how much honey it takes for them to get through the winter, you just leave that amount of honey on their hive, and you get to take all the rest because in a wild hive they won't even eat their old honey. Like I said, they always make too much. It's their insurance policy, but they don't bother with the old stuff. They like the fresh stuff, so it's not like they're looking with favor towards the other honey. And so that's how we still manage to have honey every year, and it's so delicious. I don't know what it is about the wildflowers around here, but somehow that flavor comes out so good in honey. But the bees' lifestyle is just absolutely fascinating because normally they're not an aggressive insect. They're kind of like a pet. You can hang around with them to a certain extent. There's certain places you don't want to stand because that'll piss them off, like right in front of their door of their hive, or right in the line where they like to fly in and out. That pisses them off, and then they'll start keep bugging you. But sometimes people will get aggressive species of bees and they will have to eliminate their hives, and that's really, really sad. But thankfully, that isn't an issue where I'm living. We've got pretty chill bees, and they aren't wiping out the native bee population here. They're not out competing them by any means. In fact, I've noticed that the honeybees tend to be, the ones that get up the latest and go to bed the earliest, where the native bees are up way early and staying up way later, and they are collecting way more. I'm like, you know, uh, I'm surprised there's anything left for the the European honeybees, but they do just thrive here because we love to plant wildflowers, and we plant tons of wildflowers. We want something blooming all the time so that, not only the bees, but the various insects that come and go, like need some pollen and nectar. So having something available going on is good for having a good predator population for your insects that you may want to be killed by predators, which is another thing. Keep lots of wildflowers growing. But the bees are just such a pleasure to walk when they're going around the flowers collecting their pollen. They get big fat sacks of pollen on their back legs, so you can tell the different colors of pollen in the hives. And oh, and when you get your honey, something I learned recently, sometimes the honey is very dark and sometimes it's very light, and you never know why. And the reason why I learned is it depends on where the distance from the wax at the end of the cap, where when the bees went to cap their wax on their comb. It depends on how much airspace was in there. That's how you change the color of your honey. So now you
Oh,
know the
wow.
difference between pale honey or dark honey. It's how much airspace was in that little cell of honey.
Interesting. Oh, that is really cool to know.
Very trippy. Oh, the bees are fascinating to watch, and the hive is like a colony. It's kind of like your human body. It's a bunch of little tiny parts that are all working together for the whole, and none of them have an individual agenda going on, except maybe the queen. But even her deal is to keep the hive going forever, And she's the only one who lives more than a year. The rest all have very, very short lifespans. It's it's the life of a bee. Yeah, you could go on for days about that too, but there's a little tiny nutshell for you.
Nice. Well, yeah, I really appreciate it, and, I would love to talk to you again at some point if you were open to it because
Love
I
to.
as I said, I feel as though we would be able to wander in many spaces,
In
and
many spaces, yes.
this is, yeah, it's so fun, and I, again, as I said in the beginning, so grateful to have come across your work and
Oh, thank you.
Growcast, because
Thank you so much.
I feel really just, it's just so cool how much great information is out there when you find it. And again, a shout out to my friend Lee Thunder Chicken. He was the one that actually sent me your interview
Oh,
on
cool.
Growcast, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, sweet." And then here we
Thank you.
are talking. Yeah. So,
That's
before I let you go, if you want to just let people know where they can find you, I do have your links below in the
okay.
description to Growcast and things like that, but and your Instagram as well. But if you have any closing thoughts or anything that you'd like to let the listeners know to, now is your chance here. The floor
Well,
is
those are
yours.
the 2 ways you can find me. You can always direct message me in the Instagram. I don't check it as often as I used to, so if I don't get back to you for a couple days, don't panic. I will get to you, or try the Discord channel, and that way, I'm always on there every day, at least off and on different periods of time. I'll go and see if people have questions for me and check up on stuff that way.
And
But
is the Discord channel Growcast?
yeah, it's
Okay.
I think they go under the name of the Order of Cultivation.
Okay. Nice.
Nothing pretentious at all about oh, they're trying to have fun, you know what I mean?
Oh
So
yeah.
adorable. It's a very good supportive group that everybody in it, we really enjoy being helpful to each other. So it's kind of a nice energy that you don't get a lot of excessive, egomaniacs kind of being overly sensitive about things. And so it's kind of
That's always
cool.
good.
I kind of like it. Yeah.
That's
Good
awesome.
for me. Well, thank you, Michelle. It's been fabulous talking to you. And so anytime you want to talk again, just give me a buzz and
Oh,
we'll do
sounds
it.
great.
Yeah, and this time I have the right browser on. Hopefully I won't have that issue again. Thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome, and thank you again for joining me, and, enjoy the rest of your evening.
All right. You take care, dear. Bye bye.
Alright, bye-bye, you too. Well, well, well. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. That was a nice little chat there. I feel like we got to, like, pick at many things, and, that was really fun, and it was actually, I get a very, warm sense from her talking to Mary Beth, and I got that sense when I heard her speaking on Growcast as well, that there's so much, lovely, warm crone energy coming from her, that is very nice. And it's always nice to talk to other growers, other people who are, tapped into this language that the plants have to share with us, the information that they've learned throughout the way, and as she said it a couple times, I just learned recently. I just learned recently, because it's just a testament to no matter what stage we're at in life, we're always learning if you're open to it. And so that is always something I observe about people when they talk. If they are talking about things that they, are coming across, or they just recently learned, or they're okay to say, "Hey, I just found this out. I didn't know this, but I know it now." And so that's one of the other reasons why I started this podcast too, is so because I feel as though we can learn something from each other all the time at all stages. And that is just something so beautiful. So I really appreciate her sharing a lot of her knowledge and going into certain things. And I do know that I will talk to her again, because I could feel that we could go deeper into certain things. But as I said, I wanted to respect her time as well. So I didn't want to keep her too long today. So up on the screen here, I've got some updates for you as always. So, first and foremost, thank you to all the patrons that are supporting us here and just helping us to continue growing the channel, continue keeping things moving, and continue motivating. It's very motivating to me, to have people coming on over to Patreon for multiple reasons, because it just shows that people are really appreciating and liking what I'm putting out. And that is seriously one of the greatest gifts, just to hear somebody say, I really like that episode, even if they're not a patron. It's just, when I hear things like that, it's fucking awesome. And I just have to say, I always really appreciate it, because that to me is a win. If someone heard an episode and they just liked it and they took the time to tell me they liked it, hell yeah, I like it, because it makes me feel like I'm actually doing what I'm trying to do, which is share information with people and talk and just really, keep this stuff going and make this place as better than we left it, or better than it was the day before, if that makes sense. And by no means am I trying to save the world, or do I have ambitions to do so. But the more we improve ourselves, the more we improve the world. And that shit is priceless. So thank you to Chance, Binaboo, Inland Sea, Liam, Amy, Miri and Hank, Jenny G, Erica, Moonlander, Mary, Catherine, Logan, Lilyvine, Debbie, and Natasha. Thank you, my patrons. I really appreciate y'all. And yeah, it's fun, and it's gonna get more fun as we go. Patreon.com/the healing home, as always. And drumroll, please. Next week's show, we have Lee Thunder Chicken. Thank you, Lee. He's going to join me on the 4th of July, and we're going to talk cannabis. I'm so excited to have Lee as a solo guest, because we did our cannabis roundtable with Ben and James of Grounded Extracts, which was freaking awesome. But I feel like we weren't able to get into certain areas of cannabis and what Lee does, because just from following him on Instagram and getting to know him, I'm just so floored with all the things that he does on a daily and all the knowledge he has when it comes to cannabis, but also just plants in general, gardening, farming, raising chickens, you name it. He seems to be one of those guys who he's always doing something. And that to me is very valuable as well. And so we'll have Lee with us next week on the 4th of July at 4 p.m. Pacific. So come and join us for a nice chat. I'm really looking forward to being able to throw down with Lee next week. New full moon offering newsletter will be out on July 3rd, which I can't believe is coming so quickly. So that'll be next Monday. So next Monday, the new newsletter drops for the month. So there'll be a new there will be a new item as well coming with that. And if you are a patron, you will find out the offering on July 2nd, which is actually Mario's birthday. So you always get the newsletter or the full moon offering of the month one day before everybody else, which gives you guys an opportunity to buy it before everybody else and buy it before it sells out. I still have a few bars of my mugwort earth hag soap and the calendula salt soap, but I am sold out of the shampoo. I will be making another batch of shampoo, though, very soon here, so that I'll be restocked with that. But for now, it is mugwort, earth hag, and calendula salt for the soap bars. And up on the screen here, if you're interested, is my menu with what I have going on. Again, I've brought this up before, but custom orders. If anybody is interested in ordering something bulk from me, sometimes that can be helpful in a couple of different ways. But we can work out bulk pricing in terms of that. And if you're looking for soap in bulk, or maybe like a salve or something, tinctures could also maybe be a possibility of that. But I think like soaps and salves, maybe even body oils, body butter is a good thing to do in bulk, So anyway, you can let me know if you're interested in that. I have just a few lavender bergamot deodorants left, and I'm really excited to say that I'm going to be reformulating my deodorant coming up here over the next couple weeks. I have a couple ideas that have been swirling around in my head, and I've been experimenting with a few things. And the deodorant that I offer right now, I've been making that same recipe for probably 12 years now. So it is definitely still awesome. Definitely love it. But, I'm noticing things that I want to change about it. And I feel like there's no better time than right now to do it. So I've got a few ideas up my sleeve, as I said. So I think I've got 2 jars of the lavender bergamot left. So once those are sold out, that formula will be improved and added upon. So it'll be very similar to what it is, but it's going to be a little different in its own beautiful way. So, as always, you can email me, michelleshealinghome@gmail.com, if you want to place an order. That's the easiest way, because otherwise things get lost in translation. So if I have you in an email and I have what you want and we can converse through email, that's the easiest way to do it for me. Just because, like I said, otherwise things kind of get lost. You can also reach out to me like on Instagram or stuff via Messenger or whatever, but email is always the best, because then it's just easier to keep track of it. michelleshealinghome.com to sign up for the newsletter, to read my blog, to learn about my consultation services, which more people have been reaching out for consultations, which is really awesome. And I'm really thankful for that, because that's really fun. And I get to get into the nitty gritty of certain things for people. And I find that a lot of people like to reach out to me for more emotional, spiritual based healing stuff, which is awesome, because that is where I do feel like I have a strong kinship to, or what I'm drawn to. And so that's been really fun to actually go into that. And I really enjoy applying German new medicine to the way that I look at health and people's ailments, or what people's are experiencing. And typically the experience of that has been that many people have been like, "Oh, whoa. Okay, that makes sense." And so anyway, as I've said before, I'm not a German new medicine practitioner by any means, but it is the one of the methods of health that I find to be the most accurate, in my opinion. So anyway, just wanted to give a little drop about that, about consultations and stuff. So you can find out more about where I'm comfortable, the spaces I'm comfortable in, on my website. And also you can always email me with what you're wanting to talk about, and I will let you know if it's within my comfort zone, because there are things that are, if I don't feel comfortable working with certain things, I will tell you. I'm not going to just try and be like, "Oh, sure, we can work on that." No, I'm not going to do that. So just be open and transparent about what you're wanting to work at, and then I'll be open and transparent with you about if I'm comfortable doing it, and we can move forward, or I can also suggest other practitioners for you if I don't think I'm suited for something. So anyway, call or text me 503-568-1569 if you don't feel like doing the email thing. Mario had a really great presentation yesterday on Old World, Florida, and he was also joined by Juan of the One on One podcast. They talked about the fleur de lis, and boy, oh boy, was it good. And I got to say, I'm so proud of Mario, and I'm so happy for him to have been able to get that opportunity to talk with Dr. Largo, because Mario has they've kind of tried to connect over the last like handful of months, and like timing wasn't right, or Juan tried to invite both of them onto a show, and then Mario couldn't do it, or Longo couldn't do it, or whatever. None of that stuff matters. What matters is that they finally got to connect, and it was yesterday. And so Mario has his presentation up on his channel, Symbolic Studies, on YouTube, so you can watch it there. I know, Old World Florida, it's on his channel, and it's also on the One on One podcast on YouTube as well. So multiple places where you can watch it and review what they were talking about. But it was really great. And, he linked his Northern symbolism research into it as well. And I think that all three of them together made a really good team talking about this information. So it was really fun to see. Last Thursday, every Thursday, Summer of Love, baby. It's the Summer of Love here on Wind Mountain. So we are going to dive into more 1960s mythos. We are not necessarily going to be talking about Manson, but you know what? We're going to talk about acid. We're going to talk about LSD. We're going to talk about the acid tests and how LSD played a big role in the 60s, MK Ultra, you name it. we're going to talk about the things we know about it and the stuff that I've researched over the years. We're also going to talk about our own personal trip stories. So if you're into that sort of thing, come along for the ride. And we're gonna totally get into it. And we kind of determined that's going to be our subject for tomorrow. So come join us for last Thursday. As always, bring your drinks, bring your casual clothing, because it's last Thursday, bro. And with all of that said, I think that is going to do it for today. As always, appreciate all you guys. I see you guys in the chat. Thank you so much for being here. Yes, goddess bless the USA. That's awesome. Thank you, Binna. And you say you're interested in a slab of soap to resell. All right, well, let's talk. We should email each other so we can talk about that. And yeah, okay, Moonlander, God bless natural deodorant. Hell yeah. Nice. I love it. Well, that's so cool. Oh, Thunder Chicken, Mario nailed it. Glad you got to listen to it. He did so well. I was so proud of him, man. And he got a huge buzz after that presentation. And I can always tell a difference when he's being like over crucial or over critical of himself, or when he feels like he gets out of a presentation, he's like, yeah. And last night it was a yeah. So that's always really awesome to see, because yeah, he was able to as PK said yesterday, spill his cup a little bit with those guys, and it was really, really awesome. So anyway, yeah, shout out to Albert Hoffman. That's right. And so, yes, alrighty, folks. Well, we'll see you next week for episode with it'll be episode 32 with Lee Thunder Chicken on the 4th of July. And until then, take care, and we will see you real soon. Have a lovely evening.